All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Lockup Shutdown podcast. My name's Monica. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Zach. How's it going this evening?
It's going awesome. It's been a awesome week of NFL football with maybe the best weekend in the history of the league happening this weekend, and now it's time to do what everyone comes to play sports for, and that's compete for a championship this weekend. So, best time of the year if you're an NFL fan.
Absolutely. We've certainly had some good, some bad, and some ugly. But now it's conference championship weekend, and today we'll talk about the horrid NFL overtime rules, decide whether or not Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay next year, and Zach has some complaints for all NFL defensive play callers throughout the league. But first, doing things a little bit differently this week. It's not our biggest surprise from the week behind. Instead, let's talk about the offensive powerhouse that has been the Cincinnati Bengals this season. Zach, tell me, after defeating a defensive-heavy Titans team who still managed to sack Joe Burrow 9 times, are the Bengals soon to be an unstoppable offense?
This was a defensive-heavy Titans team, but the Bengals, as always, and as I predicted, showed up and showed out. Jamar Chase having a tremendous season, continuing that with 109 yards against the Titans. Joe Burrow throwing for almost 350 yards. And then you add in Joe Mixon with 50-plus yards and a touchdown. So Bengals team is unstoppable on offense, if you didn't already know that. And I think they're trying to make the transition from becoming an unstoppable offense to now becoming an unstoppable team, as their defense was able to shut down the newly returned Derrick Henry and Deontay Foreman, which many teams couldn't do. And although they may not have shut down A.J. Brown, they contained him enough and forced 3 interceptions from Ryan Tannehill. So the Bengals, if you don't already think they're legit, they'll have a chance to show you they're legit against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, I think that starting next year, I think my answer would probably be yes, and I'll talk about the reason why it's starting next year later on in the episode, but let me praise them for just a moment, just as you have. Joe Burrow, obviously an incredibly talented quarterback surrounded by incredibly talented players, and Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, CJ Uzomah, the list keeps going on and on and on. If the Bengals can have a great O-line heavy draft or free agency, I can see their offense absolutely being unstoppable, especially next season. But that being said, we'll have to see if the Bengals do focus on their struggling O-line, because they could certainly use a defensive boost just as much with how weak their secondary has been, their linebacker core. The Bengals have a lot to focus on, and I don't know if that's going to lead to them being an unstoppable offense, let alone an unstoppable team within the next year. But absolutely, if they're drafting O-line, their offense is going to be incredible next year.
Yeah, Joe Burrow is able to have the game he has and throw for 350 yards when you get sacked 10 times, which is pretty ridiculous, but also shows how good he can be if you just get a mediocre offensive line. We're not even asking him to get the best line in the league, but yeah, Bengals will be scary if they can even get to average within the offensive line area.
9 sacks and still won. I believe that's a playoff record, or at the very least ties Donovan McNabb's playoff record. Let's move on and talk about the Green Bay Packers and 49ers game in the NFC divisional round. After a devastating loss to the 49ers, is Aaron Rodgers bound to finally give up on Green Bay?
I think Aaron Rodgers has played his last game in a Green Bay Packer uniform. I think it was a great run for him, and he finished with a grand total of 1 Super Bowl, which I don't know if that's just more about him or the Packers as a whole, but I think next time Aaron Rodgers wears an NFL jersey, not be in Green Bay.
It's certainly rare for any player in the modern age to get a Super Bowl ring who's not named Tom Brady, but yeah, I think I have to agree. I've been saying all season that Aaron Rodgers was going to stay in Green Bay, but I think I made it clear that it was only going to be if they were as successful as everyone figured they were going to be. And unfortunately, they weren't that successful, and I think that's the final nail in the coffin for Rodgers. Again, after a rough offseason through through the earlier parts of the season, we kind of figured that this was a last chance for Aaron Rodgers, and once again, the Packers were let down in the playoffs, and he's stuck holding on to his single ring, single appearance in the Super Bowl. I think Rodgers ought to be fed up with playing for that organization, and I definitely think next time we see him, he's going to be in a different color uniform.
Yep, I would be fed up with the Packers as well if I was Aaron Rodgers. I get they only scored 10 points, but you lose without giving up a defensive touchdown. Giving up a touchdown defensively. And to find a way to do that with a last-second field goal as well as a blocked punt, which got them back into the game just at the end in the fourth quarter. So, an unlucky run for Aaron Rodgers this season, but as a whole, I think his Packers career is shut down, as we would like to say, and he'll move on to a different team wherever that may be. I think it's too early to speculate where those new teams might be.
Well, we know for certain that Jordan Love will be having a great time being a starter next season, and obviously Aaron Rodgers is going to be going somewhere else. I personally think it's going to be the Broncos, as most people have come to speculate, but again, it's far too early to speculate on anything. So let's talk about one of the other games this week, which was between the Rams and the Bucks, and you seem to have some complaints about some certain defensive play calling at the end of the game, certainly as you have been all season whenever you've seen this called. So tell me, Zach, what is your issue with prevent defense?
Yeah, prevent defense and I do not have a good relationship. And it didn't start on Sunday afternoon when I was watching the Bucks, but I think it might have reached its maximum when I saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play about as good of a fourth quarter as you could play. And then all of a sudden they decide to change up everything they've been doing the entire game and be like, oh, well, this is worked all game, but let's not use it when it's the most important time of the game. And decide to go in a prevent defense, which ultimately cost them the game after Cooper Kupp goes for 20 yards. They're like, oh man, that didn't work. So let's do it again. Let's get Cooper Kupp to beat us for 44 yards on the next play and let Matt Stafford spike the ball and win us the game with Matt Gay. So time after time with prevent defense, you think, oh, let's bend but not break. And on the last drive of the game, especially with teams having their timeouts, not being rushed too much by the clock as the Rams were in that scenario, I just can't understand it. If it was a good defense, teams would play it during the game. But it's not a good defense. It gives up multiple points. And in a one-possession game or a tie game, as it was in that scenario, I can never understand why we play prevent defense.
Absolutely. I believe that your frustrations first started off watching Wink Martindale call plays for the Baltimore Ravens, and obviously the Ravens and Wink Martindale aren't exactly known for their incredible prevent defense. That's one thing for certain. I think personally, I liked the prevent defense play call that we saw between the, I believe it was the Cowboys and 49ers in the wild card round, where the 49ers were completely covering the sidelines, making sure that they couldn't throw the ball and get out of bounds, and we obviously saw Dak Prescott running down the middle of the field, and it certainly at the very least makes you play the game a little bit differently offensively. Just what is it that makes you so frustrated by it?
It's got to be... Well, one, I'd never play prevent defense if I was a defensive coordinator. You've got a working defense that you've practiced all season for 18, 19, 20 weeks by now. And then you seem to just go away from it at the end of a game when it matters the most. And it seems to, if it's a 3-possession game, 2-possession game, I get trying to take time off the clock. But when it's a tie game They don't even need to get to a touchdown. It's different if you have to get into the end zone at one point. They don't even need to get to the end zone. They just need to get to the 30-yard line, to the 40-yard line. You let them get to the 12-yard line on a 44-yard bomb to Cooper Kupp. If you're going to play prevent defense, at least be good at prevent defense. The Bucs throw everyone back and still let the best wide receiver in the league run right past them. It's almost like someone didn't tell the Bucs that Cooper Kupp was the best receiver in the league and didn't already have 140 yards and a touchdown. Now you add on 44 more yards, and he gets 180 yards and a touchdown, which I can't understand. You got two guys to cover. Cover Cooper Kupp, cover OBJ, make Matt Stafford and someone else make a play. But nope, they can't even do that after they'd done an okay job of that in the second half, only giving up 7 points before that.
Well, I certainly have to agree with you there. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, changing up your coaching philosophy at any point, let alone at the very last second of the game, is certainly not the way to go about any game, but obviously you also don't want to end up being like the Jets where you run cover 0 on the last play of the game, and ultimately there's a balance to the game of football, and clearly teams can't seem to find that balance coming to the end of the game and running prevent defense, just hoping not to let up a score and still ending up doing it anyway. Let's talk about another frustrating part of the NFL though, shall we? Have NFL overtime rules continued to ruin the game of football?
I wouldn't say they've ruined it, but have they made it as good as they could be? That's a definite no. NFL playoff games, the team that has won the coin toss is 10-1 in those overtime, in the last 11 overtime games, which does lead to the point that the coin toss is a little bit too much of a deciding factor. But I think my personal situation would be, don't make anything complicated. I've seen all sorts of crazy situations that teams want to create for an overtime. I say, if you want to play overtime, play it like other sports do. Keep everything the same and just put more time on the clock. Play a 15-minute quarter. Whoever's winning at the end of that quarter is the winner of the football game. And if it's tied after that, play another 15-minute quarter. And I get maybe you can't play 8 different quarters if it's tied and tied and tied. But don't change the game just because teams are tied at the end of a game. I think play what football is and keep the rules the rules. Touchdowns don't win a game in the first quarter. They shouldn't win a touchdown after the first, second, third, and fourth quarters, in my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly will say that I don't like the sudden death overtime rules that we have in the NFL, and ultimately, I think, yeah, absolutely, they have been a detriment to the sport of football. In the regular season, there's only a 52% advantage towards whoever receives the ball first in overtime. But during playoff games, the team that receives the ball first has won 90% of the time. So obviously, a good team playing against a bad team can certainly overcome not getting the ball first in overtime, but when it comes to the playoffs, when teams are evenly matched, if you're getting the ball first, you're probably going to win. I think that college football overtime rules are probably the way to go, because they create far more exciting games for fans, because either team can win and they still have a chance at a rebuttal. I think it keeps people hooked longer when the game goes into overtime, especially when you actually feel like your team has a chance, but personally, I find myself shutting the TV off after an overtime coin toss in the NFL, because at that point, I basically feel like I've already know who's going to win.
I like college for college. I think giving the ball to Matt Corral at the opponent's 25-yard line is a lot different than giving the ball to Patrick Mahomes at the team's opponent 25-yard line. So I do get the rules need changing, and it's just like everything else where once it actually affects the result of a good game, it will get changed, just like the pass interference rules got changed momentarily after the Saints-Vikings game, but I think everyone's freaking out too much because it just happened, but also I think it would be nice to change, and I think I would rather have a 15-minute quarter just like you do in the NFL the
NBA.
NFL regular season. You have a 10-minute quarter and then see what it's like after 10 minutes, and very rarely does it end in a tie. So I think having a 10-minute quarter or 15-minute quarter where you just play regular football would be a lot better than giving Josh Allen, Tom Brady, other NFL level quarterbacks the ball at the opponent's 25-yard line and saying, hey, go 25 yards, and then let's see what happens after that.
Absolutely. Let's move on because it's just about all we have time for, and it's time to wrap things up and talk about our updated brackets because we didn't do so great this week. Zach, your perfect bracket is finally gone, and you were 2-2 on the games this week. I was far worse and was only 1-3 and somehow picked an upset to be my only correct pick. So let's fix our brackets a little bit. Zach, you have a lot less to correct here, so why don't you fix the NFC side of your bracket, seeing as you were wrong twice?
Yep, on the NFC side, I unfortunately had both the Packers and the Bucks making the Super Bowl and are making the NFC Championship, and neither of them are making it in the real world. But we do have the Niners and the Rams. I've been high on the Niners all season if you've been listening for a while, and given that they've already beaten the Rams twice, I think they'll be able to make it a third time this charm, beat the Rams, and make their way to another Super Bowl. They may not have the flashy names that sell tickets, but they've got a way to get it done with Jimmy G, Elijah Mitchell, and Deebo Samuel still creating whatever position he wants to be called. We've seen him called a wide back, a running back, a wide receiver, whatever he is. He's going to lead the Niners to a victory, and they are going to be playing the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl. It'll be a 4 seed and a 6 seed in the Super Bowl. Bengals will beat the Chiefs. My AFC side of the bracket is perfect, and I'm not going to change anything else because why would I change something that's not broken? And I predicted this matchup, and I predicted the Bengals, and I'm going to keep my prediction the same in that situation.
I've had both of my initial Super Bowl picks out of the window already. I've had both of my secondary Super Bowl picks out of the window already. And so now I have to completely revamp my bracket because the only game I got right this week was predicting that the Rams would beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So let's start off with the Chiefs and the Bengals in the AFC Championship. Statistically speaking, the Chiefs are either much better than or one-upping the Bengals in just about every single statistical category, both offense and defense. Ultimately, the Bengals have one of the worst secondaries in the league and probably the worst offensive line in the entire league. The Bengals have already beat the Chiefs once this year, but I highly doubt that they're going to be achieving a sweep over Patrick Mahomes anytime soon. That's just my personal take on it. I'm going to have to pick the Chiefs to make it to the Super Bowl this year. On the other side of the league, between the 49ers and Rams, I think that the 49ers seem to have a similar statistical advantage over the Rams, at least for the most part. Defensively speaking, I fully expect a top 10 passing defense like San Francisco to make the Rams pay for any costly mistakes, which they've ultimately been very prone to do, with Matthew Stafford being the pick six king this year. And I think Jimmy G may be inconsistent, but I think he has a huge game coming ahead of him this week, and I think we're going to see a rematch between the Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl, which certainly would have been very unlikely if I told you that last year, but I think that's going to be the case, and I think that the Chiefs are going to once again come out on top in a win over the 49ers.
Bengals, just wanted to inform you that they did throw for 446 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs last game, and Jamar Chase had 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I think the Bengals are getting better and better every week. And although they may not have a great offensive line, when you look at the Chiefs, the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, you could think of a lot of things about the Chiefs before you think about their defensive line. I think the Bengals obviously don't have a great offensive line, but they're not going to go up against a great defensive line. I think those two will cancel each other out, and that Joe Burrow will have time in the pocket to find his receivers, find Jamar Chase, and lead his team to a Super Bowl against the 49ers.
I'm not sure about that. When I think about the Chiefs, I'm thinking about Melvin Ingram and Chris Jones, at least when I'm thinking about their defense, so we'll just have to see who's correct about this one. You've certainly been more accurate as far as the brackets have gone this year, and we'll just have to see how all that goes. Who knows? Well, one of us could end up 0-2 for all we know. But that is all we have time for. It's been a very good episode this week. We had a few issues, but that's beyond the point. How are we feeling this week, Zach?
Feeling good. I said it at the beginning that if you play or played a sport, you play it to win championships. And although it may not be the actual real championship, it is a conference championship, and we're going to have 2 championship games this weekend. So I encourage everyone to watch those games this weekend on Sunday afternoon. And if you haven't watched an NFL game yet this year, well, then now is a great time to start, and you got to watch the best games of the year.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're encouraging anyone with that one, but certainly this is going to be one of the best weeks of football we'll see in a long time. And hell, we just saw one of the best weeks of football we've seen probably ever, but that's all we have time for, so I think it's time for us to lock up and shut down.